Perhaps you felt that way before that moment when you realize every explanation, every effort, every tear has fallen into a void. You stand before someone, yet it seems they only see themselves reflected in your eyes. And then, after too much pain, you choose silence. Not because you've stopped loving them, but because you've grown exhausted from a battle that was never fair. For a narcissist, love has never been about connection. It's a game of power, a stage where they shine, and you are the audience, the prop, the energy source that keeps them feeling alive. They live off your reactions, your tears, your anger, your patience, your forgiveness. Every emotion you give becomes the fuel that sustains the illusion that they're still in control. But one day, when you stop reacting, when you go silent, disappear, and truly maintain no contact, that performance begins to collapse. And it's at that very moment that the most fascinating thing happens. What will they do when they lose that power? Will they rage, chase after you, or pretend they don't care? Will they try to reach out, manipulate those around you, or quietly seek a new supply to fill the void? In today's video, we'll dive deep into the psychology of a narcissist when you maintain no contact for a long period of time to understand what truly happens inside their mind and why your silence has the power to make them crumble from within. First, let's talk about the attention fuel mechanism. You see, when you choose silence, when you truly pull yourself out of that exhausting cycle, you're not just walking away, you're unplugging the power source that keeps the narcissist alive. Because they don't live on love, they live on the emotional reactions of others. To them, every tear you shed, every explanation you give, every time you lose your temper or try to make them understand becomes fuel. And as long as you keep reacting, whether in anger or in pity, they still feel alive, powerful, and in control of you. In psychology, this is called narcissistic supply, the narcissist's fuel source. It's the stream of energy they need as desperately as air. They cannot define their self-worth through any inner truth. They can only do it through the gaze and emotions of others. The more they make you hurt, confuse you, or make you fear losing them, the stronger they feel. They need to be seen, noticed, and reacted to, whether in joy or in pain, as long as your attention remains fixed on them. But when you choose silence, when you stop arguing, stop explaining, stop texting, stop needing them to understand, you do something they never believed you could. You cut off the oxygen feeding their fire. They begin to suffocate in the quiet space you create. They grow restless, anxious, even furious, because suddenly the emotional fuel that once maintained their illusion of power has vanished. A narcissist lives in a world where everything must revolve around them. They are like actors who cannot survive without an audience. And you, yes, you are their central spectator. When you leave your seat, their stage goes dark. No eyes are watching, no one remains to manipulate, and the very core of their false identity begins to shake. Because when no one is left to reflect them, they are forced to see themselves small, fragile, and hollow, the self they've spent a lifetime hiding. And it's in that very moment that the real battle begins. Because your silence isn't just an empty space, it's a quiet rejection of their power, an unspoken message that says, "I'm no longer playing by your rules." From here, the narcissist's mind begins to fracture, and what they do next will reveal who they truly are, more clearly than ever before. The process of no contact. When you first go no contact with a narcissist, what they feel isn't loss, it's defiance. In their mind, you can't really leave, you're just playing hard to get. They believe that, like every time before, you'll eventually break, text them, explain yourself, or come back. So, in the early stage, they deny reality. They watch you closely, your posts, your tone, your silence, not to understand, but to measure how much control they still have. As silence stretches on, they shift into emotional manipulation mode. Suddenly, they become unusually sweet. You might receive messages like, "I just wanted to check if you're okay," or "I've been thinking, maybe I was wrong." But make no mistake, this isn't remorse, it's a test. They want to see if they can still pull a reaction out of you. If you reply, even with a single word, they feel refueled, re-empowered, and the cycle begins again. When kindness fails, they escalate. Anger replaces charm. They may start criticizing you publicly, spreading rumors, or distorting stories to make you react. Because for a narcissist, a negative reaction is still better than silence. In their world, being hated is easier than being forgotten. Silence is something they cannot control, and that loss of control feels like death to them. But when you remain firm, when you refuse to engage, something far more unsettling begins to happen. They realize you no longer depend on them. You are no longer their emotional supplier, no longer the mirror that reflects their worth. And the moment they see that, the mask begins to crack. Beneath that mask lies a fragile self that has never learned to stand alone. When their supply disappears, they fall into a collapse of identity. They lose not only control over others, but also over themselves. And in that collapse, the silence they once dismissed as weakness becomes the very force that breaks them from within. Next, let's talk about the manipulation cycle of the narcissist. Anger, manipulation, victimhood. When stripped of control, a narcissist is never silent. They begin to spin through a series of repetitive reactions, 3 familiar cycles that, if you've ever dealt with them, you'll recognize instantly. They are anger, manipulation, and finally, the victim role. Each cycle is a carefully crafted psychological strategy with one single purpose: to pull you back into the game. The first is anger. This is the most instinctive reaction of a narcissist when they feel their control slipping away. They explode, attack, and destroy in every way they can. In that moment, they are no longer the cold, calculating person you once knew. They become a panicked soul, desperately clinging to the last bit of power they have left. They might lash out with insults, accusing you of being selfish, ungrateful, or a betrayer. They twist reality, invent stories in which they are the wounded one and you are the cruel villain. The sole purpose of this rage is not communication, it is to make you react. They want to see you tremble, defend yourself, cry, lose your temper, or feel afraid, anything that reminds them they still have influence over you. In psychology, this is known as narcissistic rage. It is more than anger. It is a survival mechanism. In their world, your silence equals their disappearance. And for an ego so hollow, the thought of vanishing is unbearable. The second is sweet manipulation. When anger fails, they quickly change their tone. Like an actor changing costumes in an instant, the narcissist shifts from aggressor to gentle, caring, remorseful partner. This is the stage called hoovering when they try to suck you back in. They might send emotional messages like, "I miss you," "I've really changed," or "I just want to talk, just once." They remind you of beautiful memories, intimate moments that once melted your heart. They know exactly how to touch your memory like a musician striking the perfect chord. But remember, this isn't love, it's strategy. Every word, every tear, every apology is a tool designed to stir your emotions. They don't regret hurting you, they regret losing the person who mirrored their ego. What they crave is not forgiveness, but your reaction. They want to know if you still think about them, if you're still affected by them, if it still hurts when they reach out. Because as long as you still hurt, they still exist. During this phase, many people give in. They believe this time will be different, that maybe the narcissist has changed. But in truth, there is no change, only the fear of being forgotten. What they truly want is not reconciliation, but control. And if you give in, the cycle begins again, deeper and more painful than before. The third is the victim role. When neither anger nor charm works, the narcissist turns to their final tactic, playing the victim. They begin telling others that you were cruel, that they tried their best but you were cold and heartless. They create a distorted version of the story, one where they are the wounded soul and you are the source of pain. Their goal is not only to win sympathy from others, but also to make you feel guilty. They know your empathy is your greatest weakness, and they exploit it without hesitation. They might say things like, "I can't live without you," or "I know I was awful, but you're the only one I have left." Sometimes they have others deliver their messages, or they pretend to fall into despair, even threatening self-harm, all to provoke a reaction. But every move serves the same purpose: to pull you back in, to break the boundaries you've worked so hard to build. What's frightening is that these three cycles can repeat endlessly. When anger doesn't work, they manipulate. When manipulation fails, they act heartbroken. And when silence continues, they grow angry again. Each time, they lose a bit more of their power, and behind that loss is a growing fear. The fear that you've truly escaped their control. Once you clearly see these three cycles, you finally understand they don't act out of love, but out of fear of losing their energy source. They don't grieve losing you, they grieve losing power. And that's when your silence becomes the mirror that reveals the ultimate truth. Every bit of strength they ever had was nothing more than an illusion sustained by your emotions. You know, when facing a narcissist, our first instinct is often to explain, argue, or make them understand. But eventually, you realize the more you try, the more exhausted you become. Because to them, logic isn't the goal, emotion is the battlefield. They don't want to understand you, they want to unbalance you, to regain the sense of control they crave. That's why the only real way to win this game is simple: refuse to play. Emotional discipline isn't cold silence. It's the highest form of self-mastery. It's the quiet declaration: I no longer allow anyone else to control my emotions. Every time you choose not to react, every moment you stop explaining, stop rescuing, stop trying, you're doing the very thing a narcissist fears most. You're reclaiming your power. One of the most powerful techniques psychologists recommend is the gray rock method. It sounds simple, but its strength lies in consistency. Imagine yourself as a smooth gray stone, uninteresting, neutral, impossible to grip. When they provoke, you stay calm. When they bait you with emotion, you don't respond. When they try to anger you, you remain composed. Each moment of calm sends a message louder than words: my energy no longer belongs to you. Of course, it isn't easy. The narcissist will try everything: charm, threats, pity, manipulation. They'll push every button to break your calm, because your serenity is their loss of power. But remember, every reaction you give is a gift they're desperate to steal. And when you stop giving that gift, they're forced to face their own emptiness, the hollowness they've been hiding all along. Emotional discipline means learning to observe instead of react. You see their anger and understand its fear of abandonment. You hear their apology and know it's a tactic, not love. You watch their victim act and recognize it's self-preservation, not sincerity. When you can see clearly without being drawn in, you've truly broken free. Silence, in this context, is not weakness. It's graceful power, the ability to choose peace over chaos. Because sometimes, victory isn't about striking back, but about staying calm while someone else collapses into their own storm. That is the true peak of emotional discipline. When you no longer need to prove anything, your peace itself becomes the answer. When silence stretches on, healing doesn't come all at once, it comes quietly, layer by layer. At first, you feel hollow, as if the world has lost its sound. You've been so used to reacting to chaos that calm feels strange. But slowly, you realize, in that silence, your soul is learning how to breathe again. No longer do you wait for a message. No longer do you decode someone's moods. No longer do you fear silence. The same silence that once drove you mad now becomes your sanctuary. Within it, you begin to hear what you had forgotten: your own voice, your own needs, your own worth. You realize that peace isn't something someone gives you, it's something you create when you stop allowing others to define your happiness. From the ashes of manipulation and confusion, your sense of self begins to rebuild. You are no longer the trembling person afraid of abandonment. You become grounded, steady, self-assured, and whole. You stop seeking validation because you finally see your worth in your strength, in your pain, in your quiet resilience. You understand now that true love never cages you. and real respect never requires begging. The narcissist, meanwhile, remains trapped in their own cage, a prison built from their fear of irrelevance. They cannot stand stillness, cannot exist without attention. But you, walking away, carry silence like armor. With each passing day, you feel clearer, freer, and stronger, because you now see they were never powerful, their strength lived only in your reactions. When you stop reacting, the game ends. Not because you've lost, but because you've outgrown the need to play. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't in fighting back, it's in walking away from the very place you once believed you couldn't survive without. In that silence, you don't just find peace, you find yourself again, whole, independent, and unafraid. In the end, when your silence lasts long enough, every illusion begins to crumble. The narcissist cannot bear the thought that you're calm, content, and thriving without them. Each day you stay quiet cuts deeper into the mask they once wore to hide their fragility. While they struggle to maintain their false image of control, you are stepping into something far greater: freedom. Now, you can see the full picture clearly. The manipulation, the rage, the blame, they no longer hold power over you. You don't seek to win, you no longer need to. Because true victory is not defeating them, it's realizing you no longer have to fight. You watch, you understand, but you do not engage. You stand still in silence, and through that stillness, you reclaim full ownership of yourself. If you're in the midst of no contact, remember this: silence isn't emptiness, it's transformation. It's where healing begins, where you learn to hear your own voice again instead of the chaos of theirs. Every day you don't respond, don't explain, don't get drawn back in, is a day you move closer to peace. Give yourself time. Be patient with the loneliness, because it's in those quiet moments that your true self is being reborn. Remember, what the narcissist fears most is absence, while you are learning to find serenity in it. Don't fear being forgotten, it's not a loss, it's liberation. Your silence is your loudest message. That you are mature enough not to seek validation, wise enough to choose peace over chaos, healing over reaction. And if you're still in that stage, stay the course. Keep your silence, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Because one day you'll realize you never lost that relationship. You simply woke up from it.